You don't need to quit social media or do a digital detox. You just need to change how you use it. Let's talk about how you can turn doom scrolling into building your dream life. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. Doom scrolling isn't just this slang term, it is a psychological behavior, and one that more psychologists and media researchers are defining as this compulsive and repetitive behavior of consuming negative content despite its negative emotional impact. It's that feeling, for example, when you find yourself wanting to consume one bad news story after the other, or maybe you don't want to consume it, but you find yourself doing it nonetheless. Or you find yourself stuck in scrolling everything that the algorithm is offering you, and you have to say to yourself, just one more post, and then you keep scrolling anyway. And it leads to this feeling of feeling drained, of feeling anxious, of feeling overwhelmed. We know that these platforms are designed to maximize our attention. So it is not just about our behavior, it is built into the architecture of these platforms. But if the architecture of these platforms is designed to exploit our attention, what if we turn the tables around and actually used these platforms to help to build our dream life, to shift our identity, to build our personal brand? All while staying a digital minimalist because you are using your social media for dream scrolling and dream creating instead of being exploited by it. So let's talk about my point number one, which is digital minimalism. Now, this was an idea that I learned about in Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism, and he is a professor of computer science at Georgetown University. And this idea of digital minimalism is essentially this philosophy of how to use technology. It is using technology for all of the benefits that it has to offer you, but not actually using it past this point. So you are leveraging what makes technology great, but you're also staying a digital minimalist while you do it. So in the book, Cal Newport describes this idea of digital minimalism as being a philosophy of technology use in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value, and then happily miss out on everything else. So, if you know that you are likely being exploited by these platforms because your attention is one of the most valuable currencies in the world, then why not use this to your advantage? Use this to shape your identity. Because maybe the issue isn't just how you're scrolling, but what you're scrolling. So, this is where number two, I have come up with this term, dream scrolling, or at least I haven't seen anyone else use that term before. So for me, this is the opposite of doom scrolling. It is the antidote of doom scrolling. So it's not getting lost in all of the chaos and all of the negativity or comparison that social media can potentially cause, but using it to build on your goals, to build on your ideal identity, to build on your dream life. So you're using it with intention and you're using it in a selective way, like how Newport proposes with the idea of digital minimalism. So you're using it for growth, for example. You're using it for micro learning. You're using it to create content instead of just consuming it. And when you hear people talk about detoxing from social media, I completely understand this. They have gone into this doom scrolling spiral that is obviously affecting their mental health, and they need to take a step back from those platforms. And a lot of the time, this can also be because of comparison to other people as well. But there is one platform in particular, for example, that I am such a big advocate for, and I almost don't even put a huge amount of limitations on myself when I use this platform, and that is Pinterest. I've talked on this channel before about how I use Pinterest to rewire my brain. It is quite literally the visual element of my second brain, which is also something that I've talked about in my earlier episode on building a second brain. So if you're not sure what I mean about that term, then make sure you check out that episode as well. So in more recent years, I've become more and more interested in the idea of visualization. And this is something that, as I've mentioned on this channel before in my earlier episodes, that is practiced by elite athletes in particular and high performers, from CEOs to sales executives, for example. But what I love about Pinterest is that instead of having to rely on this elite level of creating these mental pictures in your mind and the discipline required to do that, Pinterest just puts those images right in front of you. But again, you have to be really intentional about what you are consuming. So I, for example, have many boards in Pinterest and many subboards, and I really enjoy scrolling those boards. I'll be intentional about what it is that I am scrolling. I'll go through my home board, for example, and look at all of the images that I have saved on there as inspiration. And I have many boards related to many different topics or domains of my life that are actually benefiting my life. So, for example, I'll also have boards related to nutrition and body and the way that I want to eat. As I've talked about on this channel before as well, I also create boards that are related to each season. So I'll have a board for, say, summer or winter or autumn or spring that will show me the fruit and veg, for example, that is in season during that time, or the personal style that I would like to have during that season that relates to things that I already own, for example. So it will give me ideas on how to style those things. So I'm using it as this really positive platform instead of being a place to doom scroll. When I read the book on digital minimalism, it also coincided with when I started my blog and when I started to post more regularly on LinkedIn, when I started my YouTube channel and my podcast. And it's something that I have constantly had in my mind as I have been creating on those platforms. It gave me a way to know that I was leveraging those platforms as much as I could without actually being consumed by those platforms. So as much as I publish, say, 2 episodes a week on YouTube, on Spotify, for example, and I regularly publish my articles on LinkedIn, I'm very careful about the consumption that I have on social media platforms. So for example, when I publish on LinkedIn, this normally takes me a few minutes to publish my article, but then I don't actually stay on the platform. I am majority of the time posting and ghosting, and at best, I may see the first few posts that pop up on my feed. But I do love that I use the platform. I love that it has a purpose for me, which leads to my point number 3, and that is one platform per purpose. So I was at dinner last week with my cousin-in-law, so my husband's cousin, and he said to me at dinner, Diane, I feel like you are really intentional about how you use your social media, how you consume your social media. And he said that he knew this because I had liked a post that day that was from several days ago that he posted on his Instagram. But he was only partially right because I actually do use social media every day. I'm just really intentional about how I use it and which platforms I'm using at what times. So LinkedIn, for example, as I mentioned, is something that if it's not related to work specifically or work I might be doing with a client, it's something that I will use personally for myself for maybe just a few minutes a day to make sure that I'm publishing my article, that I'm giving people links to my latest YouTube episodes and my podcast episodes. It's a place where I really love to use it for thought leadership. But Instagram, for example, at the opposite end is the behind the scenes of my life. It's my real life relationships. And outside of a few exceptions, I don't actually follow many public figures at all on this platform. Then take YouTube, for example, or Spotify. This is where I'm much more intentional about micro learning. So it's not just a place that I publish my own content where I publish 2 episodes a week on both of those platforms. But it's a place that I love, love, love listening to podcasts, and more recently, really diving into audiobooks on Spotify as well. It's a place that I can research, or a place that I can get inspiration, or if I feel a little bit overloaded with the learning, it's a place that I can also get entertainment as well. And then there's X, which I use purely to follow world politics. I think that is a great place to do that, but that is definitely a place that you can get stuck in doom scrolling for sure. But I'm so intentional about the people that I follow on there, and not just following anyone and everyone. And then I also use TikTok for that being a strictly inspirational based place only. So I literally only follow a handful of people on TikTok at this stage, some of my favorite creators, making this a space for micro learning and a really nice space for motivation, as opposed to a space that feels like doom scrolling or ever feels like I could be stuck in the comparison trap. So each platform is tightly curated. It has a purpose, which also leads me into my point number 3, which is to feng shui your following list. This was something that resonated with me when I read the book Joy at Work, which is a book that Maria Kondo, the tidying sensation who wrote Spark Joy and The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, co-wrote with an organizational psychologist, Scott Sonnenschein. And in the book, they talk about this idea of feng shuiing your inbox, and it's something that apparently feng shui experts like to promote, because it means that by decluttering even your inbox, you are allowing room for more of the things that you want to receive. And so I thought this was a really interesting concept to apply to your social media. If you take this approach of tidying or decluttering your social media, or going through and unfollowing maybe businesses or influencers that you no longer align with, potentially this could even be some of your personal relationships, you will notice how dramatically different your feeds can feel across different platforms. It can instantly change the experience that you are having on there, because you're following people that inspire you, that motivate you, that you want to connect with. It's designing this much more intentional environment. But remember, no matter who you are following or what you are following on social media, the key is to not stay glued to your screen, which is where number 5 comes in, and that is the analog life. Now, I absolutely love that this is such a rising trend at the moment. So, this is the reaction or the counter response to the hyper digital way that we have been living. And this actually reminds me of something that I learned about while I was studying my MBA. And I did a course on systems thinking. And one of the key ideas that really stuck with me during that course was the idea that when you push a system past a certain point, eventually there is going to be this opposite reaction. There's going to be an opposite feedback loop. And I've seen this play out in a lot of scenarios. And I love that this is now happening with social media as well. So people are realizing that yes, social media might have its benefits, but there is so much to be gained and experienced in the physical, real world as well. And in particular, this idea of the analog trend, it's about embracing things that are physical, that are slower, that are tangible, that have texture, for example, that are tactile experiences. So for me, this manifests in things like cooking, in baking, in, for example, going on long walks. It's in, for example, practicing yoga. It is playing the piano. On the weekends, I love to flip through coffee table books as well if I'm having a really slow weekend. I read the majority of my books on my iPad, for example, and it feels so different when I do switch to a actual physical book and I have that experience. But I also don't want to give up my ebooks either, because there are so many benefits to that. But it's this idea of balancing both, which is where the analog life can come in, is that you don't need to give up your social media. It's about finding that balance and integrating things into your life that connect you with the real world, that connect you with physical things. And again, this was something that really stood out to me when I read Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism, because he talks about this idea of converting low value downtime, such as scrolling, for example, into high value alternatives. And one of the key things that stood out to me there was his discussion around craftsmanship, for example. This is something that our ancestors would have done a lot of. They spent their downtime using their hands, being creative. And that's why I did an episode recently, or I've done a few episodes on the power of having high value hobbies. So make sure you check out that episode as well. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.